Hi, thanks for joining Rise City Church's online service. My name is Courtney and I'll be your host today. If this is your first time with us, we'd love to have the opportunity to connect you. If you text the word Rise City to 484848, we'll send you a link to our online connection card. And if you're in the San Diego area, after you fill out the connection card, we'll send you a coupon for some free Chick-fil-A. Again, that's Rise City to 484848. We also want to let you know that if you have any care needs or prayer requests, we are here to help. If you text the word CARE to 484848, you'll be sent a form that you can ask to speak to a pastor or enter a prayer request. Again, that's CARE to 484848. The song you're about to hear is a song that we got to record this Saturday as a team in a professional recording studio, so that was really cool. And I can't wait for you to hear it. So here it is.
Was lost, I was asleep at the wheel, I was drifting off. My heart was failing, my heart was failing. In the dark, heard a song. It was the sweetest sound that I've ever heard, and my soul went sailing. Yeah, my soul went sailing. I'm waking up, feel my heart beating and breath in my lungs. It's like a sharp wave burning inside of my chest. I should have been gone, I could have been dead. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I can feel my heart beating and breath in my lungs.
Have you been looking for a way to serve at Rise City Church from the comfort of your own home? We're looking for online hosts to help foster community and connection during our live stream Sunday services. We also have a variety of ministries that would love your help while we're in this season of live streamed and in-person services. To request more information or to sign up for an online Rise team, visit risecitychurch.com/serve. As we move forward with this service, we just want to say thank you for your continued generosity. It's because of your gifts and prayer that we've been able to continue to do everything we do during uncertain times. We have a couple of ways that you can give. You can text us, you can give online at our website, risecitychurch.com, or you can mail or drop off a physical check to our address that is on the screen. That's all the announcements we have for today. Have a great weekend.
Well, today we're going to jump back into our Exposed series. We are seeking to shine light on the shadows of our marriages. God is the author of marriage. It was His idea from the very beginning, and therefore, we just believe that God desires our marriages to thrive. But for many couples, the COVID season has brought about some issues all the way up to the surface, and it's caused a lot of marriages to experience a fair amount of friction. And one of those issues is the inability to communicate through conflict. And so that's what we're going to actually dive into today. But before we do a full dive in, I wanted you to check out this video and just see if you resonate with it or not. Check this out.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
So didn't that video nail it? Get it? Nail it. Anyway, seriously, how often though does it feel like one of our biggest issues in marriage? It does. It revolves around our inability to communicate about as well as communicate through our the big nails right there. I mean, so often we see the nails in our spouse's head, but they don't see them. Or they see the nail right in the middle of our head, but we don't see it. And inevitably, what happens is emotions start to escalate, communication breaks down, and sadly, a wedge is driven between the two. And so, the question that I want to attempt to answer today is simply this question: how can you better communicate through conflict in your marriage? How can you better communicate through conflict in your marriage? Because here's the thing, conflict is inevitable. I mean, unless you have a perfect marriage and you've never fought or anything like that, then I mean, you should be preaching this, but conflict is inevitable. And so the way that I want to go about answering this question is actually looking at how Jesus communicated through a significant conflict in his own life with a trusted friend. Additionally, I want to share some stories, just some things that Jamie and I try to do when we have conflict, because, I mean, I know you think we're perfect, but yeah, right. We have conflict on a daily, if not daily, definitely a weekly basis. And so over the last 14 years, we have had our fair share of nails that we've had to deal with. And so hopefully sharing some of our experiences will be helpful also. So let me say this too before I get all the way in. When it comes to communicating through conflict, and we know this, right? There are varying degrees of conflict. And there's a difference between conflict that comes about because you put the toilet paper on the wrong way, right? It's supposed to be over, don't go under. Or someone doesn't clean the right way that you want them to clean. Or they don't use the laundry hamper, right? Instead, they just throw their clothes everywhere. There's that type of conflict. But you compare that to conflict that takes place when there's been an affair or abuse of any type. Here's the thing. While we're going to look at things I think are going to be super helpful and meaningful to navigating through those more severe types of conflict, today is not going to be an end-all and make everything okay in those types of situations. And so I want to highly suggest that if your conflict that comes to mind when you're listening is severe to the nature of someone's had an affair or there is abuse, then would you please seek out help? Yes, apply what I'm going to talk about, but don't stay silent. And in those types of conflict, you need others to walk with you, to pray with you, to love on you, to encourage you, to protect you, and people to keep pointing you to Jesus no matter what. So please, please, please realize there's varying degrees of conflict. Hopefully it's helpful, but we always need one another. So with that said, let's jump in. And the incident that I want to look at today from Jesus' life is when his, his bestie stabbed him right in the back. Peter, arguably one of Jesus' best friends, completely turned on Jesus and denied him 3 times. And in the book of Luke, chapter 22, the moment right after Peter denies him for the 3rd time, and all of a sudden there's a cock-a-doodle-doo, like the rooster crows, this is what Luke says about that event. It says, the Lord, and the Lord there being Jesus, the Lord looked straight at Peter. And then it goes on to say, and then Peter went outside and wept bitterly. Now this had to be such a brutal moment in the relationship between Jesus and Peter. I mean, I can just see the look in Jesus' eyes when he turned and he looked straight at Peter right after rooster had crowed. And the reason I can see that expression on Jesus' face is because I've seen that look, or I've even given that look before in different relationships. It's the look of disappointment. And many of you, right, you've seen that look maybe from your spouse, or you've given that look to your spouse. And for Peter, we know that look rattled him to his core. I mean, we're told he went and he wept bitterly. And while I know Jesus and Peter are not married, I do believe those of us who are married can resonate with the hurt and the pain that Jesus and Peter both experienced in that moment. So how did they work through it? In particular, how did Jesus communicate through the conflict with Peter, considering Peter was the one in the wrong? And the answer to that question is actually found in the last chapter of the book of John. And in the last chapter of the book of John, we're going to see 5 ways that Jesus communicated through conflict. John 21 actually picks up after Jesus had been crucified and raised from the dead. The disciples, they've already seen Jesus a couple times after his resurrection. And so there are some days that have now passed since this incident where Peter denied Jesus 3 times and had the look and he walked away and wept bitterly. And the first word of John 21 clues us in about the first way to go about communicating through conflict. This is John 21, verse 1. It says, later, Jesus appeared again to his disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. The first thing that John makes the point to actually point out is this word later, meaning some time had passed. It means that Jesus did not immediately confront Peter the first time that he saw him in his resurrected state. Rather, it was later. And this is critical to see because that little amount of space has such power and potential to actually allow somebody to tap into God's grace before engaging in the controversial conversation. You see, the first way to communicate in conflict is this. This is what we can take away, is to create a little space. To create a little space. I mean, how much of your conflict could be helped if there was just a little space created for the two of you to actually think, to take some time to pray, to process, and then come back together and engage in the conversation. I think the reason this stands out to me so much is because in my marriage with Jamie, Jamie's an internal processor, I'm an external and verbal processor, and so she needs that space to try to think through her words, where I can just bombard her with words because I'm a big mouth, but I'm also in those moments full of emotion. And so if we take that little space and both of us are intentional about it, our conversation through the conflict can actually be more constructive because she's thought through what she wants to say. My emotions have kind of went to the wayside more, and we can address it. Creating that little space is beneficial because what it ultimately does, it helps us have an opportunity to seek out empathy. Empathy, which is really hard to do in the moment when both sides are frustrated and extremely argumentative. And that empathy, what that means, and you know this, but it's putting yourself in the other person's shoes. It's trying to understand where they're coming from, trying to feel what they're feeling. I mean, who knows? I mean, what if Jesus better understood why Peter denied him, because he actually had some space between the denial and then in this moment when he comes to him? Did that help him understand where Peter was coming from? And when you take that time to seek empathy, it also gives you the opportunity, like I mentioned just a moment ago, to tap into God's grace. I mean, I don't know, but is it possible that when it says Jesus came later, that later actually helped Jesus access the grace of God so he could truly forgive Peter? Now, I'm not sure, but I know it had to have helped. And having that empathy and that grace that comes in that created space, it does. It has the potential to make such a difference in how you engage the conversation. Because if you're the one who has been offended, right? You're the one who is hurt. Then that little space where God's grace can fill your heart, I mean, it helps them prep you to actually be ready to hopefully extend forgiveness once the conversation takes place. And especially if you're dealing with a significant conflict, are you not? You're gonna need God's strength and grace anyway, right? And so both of you need to first go and to create some space before you begin to communicate the conflict. Now, I do think it's important for me to point out, creating space is not creating avoidance. What I'm talking about is an intentional time to process, and I do believe that amount of time to process probably should be determined from the start, and it's probably not a long time. I'm not advocating to you to like, hey, let's come back and talk about this in like multiple days or weeks or months from now. I'd actually encourage probably hours, because there's even a scripture that talks about don't let the sun go down on your anger. So when you do create the space, specify how long, and then come back together and then begin to move on to this second thing we see Jesus do to communicate through conflict. After we're told, by John that Jesus has been there at the Sea of Galilee and there's some time that's passed, we're then told that several of the disciples have decided to go fishing. It's Peter's idea. They decided to go fishing. And after many fishing attempts throughout the evening, they are extremely not fruitful. They haven't caught squat. They haven't caught anything throughout the whole night. But then in the early hours of the morning, Jesus calls out to the disciples from the shoreline, and this is what he says. He says, hey fellas, you caught any fish? No, they replied. Then he said, well then throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat and you'll catch some. So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. So there's a massive catch. Jesus works a miracle right here. So the response is, the disciples then, one of the disciples who Jesus loved, that's John, cries out to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he jumped into the water and he headed to the shore. And so big haul of fish. John's like, whoa, the guy on the shore is Jesus. Peter's like, it is? And he quickly jumps in the water. And then if you skip a couple more verses, this is what we're told Peter saw on the shoreline. It says, when he got there, they found breakfast waiting for them. Fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. Bring me some of the fish that you've just caught, Jesus says to them. So they go fishing, they strike out. Jesus says, throw the net on the other side. They catch a ton of fish. And all of a sudden they realize the person on the shore is Jesus. Peter's so excited, he goes running and he jumps in the water, swims to the shoreline. And then when he gets there, Jesus is right there. And there's still a huge elephant in the room, right? There's still conflict that's not been addressed. But when he gets to the shoreline, the first thing that Jesus is doing is cooking them some fish and chips, right? He's blessing Peter. Are you kidding me? Which tells me Jesus was leading with grace. When he's engaged in the conversation, the first thing he did in the conversation is he led with grace. He helps him catch the 153 fish, and it actually then provoked Peter. It provoked Peter. When he led with grace, it provoked Peter to come search out Jesus. And there he is cooking them breakfast. This is amazing and so important to see because Jesus, by leading with grace, means he was kind. He was choosing to be generous before he engages into the conflict of the conversation. I mean, what if we started our conversations through conflict with grace? What if we started by trying to say or do something that was kind before engaging in whatever the difficult topic is? You see, the reason this is critical to see and do is because grace on the front end it's kind of like trying to defuse a detonated bomb and keep it from exploding and leading with grace. What it does, it helps attempt to keep the emotions at bay and the very nature of grace, right? The very nature of grace is giving something to someone that they don't deserve and it's giving someone a gift. And so the moment you say, well, I don't want to start a conversation through conflict with grace because they don't deserve it. I know, and that's exactly the point. And it's that initial grace that can really completely change the trajectory of the conversation. And so, I mean, what would that look like? I mean, some examples. How could you start with a little grace? How could you lead with grace? Maybe it's simply just praying together. Maybe it's a small touch. Maybe it's speaking something of encouragement or affirmation to one another. Maybe it's just saying something positive. Maybe you cook dinner together and have the conversation after dinner. Maybe eat some ice cream. I don't know, have a glass of wine or maybe give some space to take a warm bath. But whatever it is, offer the grace and then come back ready to engage in the conversation. I know for Jamie and I, in the midst of our conflict, one of the things that we try to do all the time is to try to reinforce to one another how much we love each other before we dig fully into whatever it is that's causing us friction. And I think it's important to point out that Peter, right? Peter made a beeline to Jesus when Jesus led with grace. He jumped in the water and he swam to Jesus. Jesus waited for the right time. He got filled with God's grace, which then led him to lead with grace. And that grace moved Peter to come to him. I mean, is it possible if both of you chose to lead with grace, it would actually bring you closer together before the conversation even starts? All right, move on. Number 3. The third thing that Jesus did to communicate through conflict is to express the truth. He expresses the truth. And this in this moment is where the elephant in the room, right? The big old elephant finally gets addressed. Jesus proceeds to cook breakfast for his boys, right? They got the fish and chips there on the shoreline, cooking the breakfast. And then after some time passes, I don't know, and breakfast is almost over, Jesus pulls Peter aside and he asks him a series of 3 different questions. This is what it says in John 21, verses 15 to 17. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon, son of John, do you love me? And there's responses of Peter that we'll look at in a moment to these questions, but he asked him these questions. And these 3 questions asked 3 times are directly in relationship to the 3 times that Peter denied him. And so what I believe what we're seeing here in this moment is Jesus is expressing the truth of the conflict. I mean, here's the reality, Peter. You denied me. And you told me you'd follow me anywhere I go. You even told me you would die for me. But the truth is, Peter, you turned your back on me. And in this moment, with these 3 questions, Jesus is telling Peter, it's an issue. We're not going to ignore this. We're not going to avoid this, not going to let this go. We're going to address this thing head on. And it must be the same with us when we communicate through conflict. At some point, you have got to express the truth. You've got to express the truth. And here's the thing, expressing the truth is having the permission to share what you see the offense to be, why it's so problematic, how it's impacted you, as well as whether or not whatever was said or whatever was done was out of alignment with God's truth. So let me say that one more time. When we're talking about expressing the truth, just here's the parameters. It's having permission to share what you see the offense to be. This is what hurt me, right? So you share that, why it's problematic, how it's impacted you, as well as then whether or not whatever was said or whatever offense was done, was it out of alignment with God's truth? And so at some point, you've got to express the truth and you've got to share. So at some point, I mean, these are just some examples. Maybe it's you simply say, I believe you're spending too much money. I believe you're watching way too much TV. I'm concerned you're drinking too much. I'm feeling hurt or unloved or undervalued, not appreciated because fill in the blank, that you're doing this and that's what's caused me to feel this way. I need you to know that when you don't acknowledge my efforts, I feel like you're taking me for granted. You're raising it, you're voicing it at me, and when you do that at me or the kids, it's actually really scary and it makes me feel unsafe. When you use derogatory words and it cuts us down or you swear, it hurts me. I don't understand why we're not having sex anymore. I'm struggling because your dishonesty has created a lot of insecurity and I'm not sure I believe what you're saying anymore. Hey, you promised that you'd be more available, but it seems like work always wins out. Every time I try to have a conversation with you, I'm competing with that stupid phone or your social media. Hey, that text or that conversation that you had with your coworker or that old friend, I just need you to know I'm not okay with it. See, whatever the source of conflict, you have to shine light on it and address it. You have to be willing to put your big boy and big girl pants on and address the issue. But here's the thing, it's not trying to be argumentative or mean. So when you express the truth, I think there's some things that we need to pay attention to that Jesus does here. The first, ask questions before making statements, right? The questions help get clarity, right? You're trying to express the truth, but maybe the questions help get the actual truth. Jesus says, do you love me, right? He asks questions before making statements. Then give space for the other person to speak. As we'll see in just a moment, Peter does respond back. So after you ask a question, let's not be like the presidential debate a couple weeks ago, like actually let the other person talk so you can have a dialogue, so you can actually get to the truth. Don't replay the offense over and over again in order to try to provoke guilt or shame or embarrassment. I mean, Jesus could have said, hey, you denied me 3 times, but he didn't keep bringing it up over me. He asked questions, just talking about one time, do you love me, do you love me? And it was obvious Peter knew he was referring to that. But sometimes we continue to say the same thing over and over again, what the person's done, because we're subversively trying to get revenge. I would recommend if you're seeking the truth, don't use globalizing terms like always or never, right? You always do that. You never do that. Like if that's not true, then don't say that because you're trying to express the truth. And then determine. Determine if the offense either dishonors or honors the Lord. Was what took place, was it a sin? Was a sin committed? Was it a promise that was broken? Perhaps a value that was violated? Maybe it was just a preference that was ignored, but that matters. That matters. And when I think of this, I honestly, I consider the time almost 9 years ago when I was struggling to tell my wife that many of you know this, had issues looking at pornography. And I was going through my Bible, and I'd written in Proverbs, where it talked about the 7 deadly sins. One of them was a lying tongue. And I'd written in my Bible, I need to tell Jamie. And I left my Bible open. And then when I got home, Jamie said, hey, I'd like to talk to you. And she just said, I saw in your Bible that you left open that you said there was something you need to tell me about. And it was right next to a lying tongue. Can we talk about what that is? And I promise you, there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of emotion, but the way she went about it, she didn't say, you always do this, or what did you do, or why did you, like, she wasn't accusatory, she's asking questions, she gave me space to share, and it did it. It just created an incredible environment for me to be able to be honest and to begin to work through the conflict and communicate through that conflict. All right, number 4. Fourth thing is to create clear expectations. Fourth thing, create clear expectations. When Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? Peter says, well, yes, of course, I love you. Then Jesus says, then I want you then to feed my lambs. Jesus told him. Do you love me? Well, Peter says, yes, of course I love you. Then he says, well, then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. Jesus said, well, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know above all things. I love you, Jesus. Then feed my sheep. What Jesus is doing here, he's letting Peter know what he needs to see in order to know that Peter's words aren't merely words. He's creating clear expectations by saying, hey, here are the actions for you to take that's going to back up what you're saying to me. And this ensures that both of you aren't just saying things that the other person wants to hear, but that you are actually committing to make a commitment and to carry it out so you hopefully aren't in the exact same conversation and same conflict a couple weeks later. Peter, if you love me, then feed my lambs. Then take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep. Both of you need to come away considering how you can improve on whatever brought about this source of conflict. And so, hey husband, or hey wife, can I just tell you, it would be helpful, or I really need you to fill in the blank. For me to know that we're taking steps forward, I need you to, maybe more examples, I need you to help around the house versus just expect me to do everything. I need you to give me a little bit more affection before just jumping straight into sex. I mean, that's what I say to Jamie, I need some affection. I need you to be home when you say you're gonna be home. I need you to put your phone down when we're talking so I actually know you're paying attention to me. Man, it would help if you communicate with me before you actually commit to buying whatever that is, or I really need you not to raise your voice at me or swear at me. I need you to tell me that you actually love me more, that you're proud of me every so often. Man, it would help. I need you to come to church or watch church with me and not make excuses every week the very last minute. Right? It's creating these clear expectations that will help you get through the conflict. And it's on both sides. So it helps both of you know how to best love the other and to provide them both the environment and the security that they need or that you need so that you can love them well and they can love you back in return. And then last but not least, the fifth and final thing Jesus does to communicate through conflict effectively is he seeks to restore the relationship and discourages comparison. He seeks to restore the relationship and discourage comparison. So this is where we're at, right? He's created some space. Remember, later. He then leads with grace. He then expresses the truth. They've created some clear expectations. And now Jesus wants to make sure the relationship is restored. And so he reminds Peter of their commitment to one another. Picking up in verse 18. I tell you the truth. When you were young and you were able to do what you liked, you dressed yourself and you went wherever you wanted to go. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands and others will dress you and take you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to let Peter know what kind of death he would glorify God. Then Jesus told him, follow me. So to summarize what Jesus is saying to Peter right here, right? Because there's a lot that he's saying, essentially saying, hey, Peter, remember, you chose to follow me. And that choice actually cost you your very life. Your life is no longer about just your wants and your needs and you dressing yourself and you going where you want to go, but it's actually now about you dying to yourself and following me, even all the way up into your death, right? He's trying to restore the relationship here because is this not the case with marriage? Because, right, marriage involves this dying to self for the sake of loving your spouse as well as loving your family well. And sadly, right, there are so many marriages today where both spouses are still trying to live for themselves. They're fighting for their own wants, their own needs, their own rights, and they forgot that they made a promise. They've forgotten that they made a promise on that special day, and you said, I do. And when you said that, essentially you were saying, I die. I die to me to now embrace we. It's not about me anymore. It's now about us. And when both the husband and the wife choose to die to themselves and embrace the new reality of we, the marriage is so much better. And in this moment, Jesus is reminding Peter of his calling and his commitment. And he's reassuring Peter that he's still committed to Peter too. He's restoring this relationship, right? Because when he says, follow me, what Jesus is saying, he says, hey, I'm still in this thing too. I still want you to follow me. I have not given up on you. Let's hit the restart button and move forward. And there's something so important about restoring your relationship after communicating through conflict. To hit that restart button, to recommit yourselves to one another, to reassure each other that you're still in this and you're not giving up and you're going to seek to do your best to get better. Both of you are going to make that commitment. But here's the thing. No sooner than Jesus and Peter have this moment and the relationship's restored and he's inviting them to come follow him and saying, hey, remember, we're in this. Comparison comes calling in the form of a guy named John. Peter turned around and saw behind them a disciple whom Jesus loved. The disciple whom Jesus loved. That's this guy, John. Peter asked Jesus, well, what about him, Lord? What about him? See, Peter starts comparing himself to John. He's comparing his calling, his commitment to Jesus that's going to cost him his life. And he says, well, if it's going to cost me my life, then what about John, Lord? I mean, like, is he going to have to die too? Jesus responds and he says, well, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? As for you, you follow me. Now, if you ever wondered if Jesus is blunt and a little direct, I mean, that question is pretty like, bam, right? But here's the thing, Peter's losing focus and he's starting to compare. And maybe you could say he's even complaining a bit. And Jesus immediately shuts him down. What about John? Right? You want to know, what about John? Is he going to have to die too? Jesus says, what is that to you? As for you, you follow me. You follow me. It's not about others. It's about us. It's not about their marriage. It's about our marriage. You can't get caught up in the comparison trap. You gotta stay focused on one another, because the easiest way to stir up more conflict and fail in communicating through that conflict is comparison. Comparison robs contentment. Comparison breeds discontentment, and it begins to pull you further apart. I can't tell you how many couples I meet, and I meet with them, and comparison is their poison. I mean, it's killing their communication, and it's escalating their conflict. It's not to say, I mean, it's important to know this. It's not to say that you can't learn from other marriages, or to try to seek together, right, other people to learn some practices that may benefit your marriage. But if you're always looking at other marriages more than your own, you're bound to become discontent. But the more the two of you are focused on one another, and it's focused on the two of you, and focused on Jesus, of course, the better you're going to be. Find gratitude for what you have, and seek the Lord to experience all He has for the two of you in marriage. Let other marriages be other marriages. You be you. You two be we. Be us, and make it your highest priority to seek the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your soul, all of your mind, and all of your strength. Follow Jesus above all else. And I believe you'll find your relationship restored, your relationship refreshed, and ultimately relishing in the goodness of God. And really, that's my prayer for all of you today, that God would inspire both of you to apply these practices in your marriage. Because maybe the conflict issue has been exposed. But if you can work through these things, it can be powerful. And it has the potential to make your marriage beautiful. And plus, is this not what we see Jesus do in His relationship with us? Does He not create a little space, pour out a lot of grace, express some truth, give us some paths to walk right, some clear expectations, and all the while, as we are stumbling and fumbling at times through life, He's restoring that relationship, saying, stay focused on me. Don't compare to everything else. You stay focused on me. And I'll make all things new. I can make beautiful things even out of something you think might already be done.
All this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all. All this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from this ground at all? And you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. And you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. All around, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. And you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. And you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. And you make
Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us online today. We serve a God that can make beautiful things out of everything, honestly. And so I just want to encourage you to seek that from the Lord in your personal life, in your relationships, in your marriages. And as mentioned earlier, we want to come around you and beside you. So if you do want to connect with a pastor to pray with you, you have a prayer request, make sure to text the word CARE to 484848. We want to journey through this together. We want to see marriages thrive, and we want to see Jesus just do an incredible work in people's hearts. And so I want to remind you, we are both now online and on site. If you want to join us at the brick and mortar next Sunday, 9/11, make sure to RSVP for that online, or keep tuning in with us live each Sunday at 10 a.m. So thanks again for joining. May we be a people who wake up, rise, and shine. May we wake up to Jesus, rise to life in Him, and shine to others for Him.